Howdy, y'all. Whoops, let me allow me to mute my stream audio so that I'm not getting double audio in my ears. Thank you very much. Hey, so Dirty Invincible and I are working on doing a podcast we're calling The Plot Holes. It's basically just going to be, us talking about movies, ridiculousness in movies. And so this is our inaugural episode, so please excuse any technical difficulties and apologies for starting really late. We meant to start at 1, but I was having some trouble getting our streaming setup all rigged up, but I think we're good now, so we'll see how this goes. This may, we may change things up in the future, but for now, we're going to try this out. So, without further ado, welcome to the Plot Holes, where a couple of jackasses stretch credulity and mock artistic vision to tell you what's wrong with multi-million-dollar movies, most of which are older than our target demographic. I am Macron.
And I'm DirtyInvincible.
And we are the Plot Holes.
The Plot Holes.
The Plot Holes. We're really synced up here.
Yep.
I'm blaming technical difficulties on throwing me off. That's my
on
excuse.
everything.
On everything.
On everything.
If this podcast sucks, technical difficulties.
Yep. It was Discord. We blame Discord.
It was Discord. It was Twitch stream together.
OBS. Yeah, it's Twitch. All of it.
Is it too quiet? Yep. Is it too quiet? Let's see. I have to crank us up in the headphones. Let me see. I can boost Jason a little bit. I can boost myself a little bit there.
Yeah, I had to be careful because on my end, when I was boosting you inside of Discord, it was blowing out the audio inside OBS.
Inside
crap.
OBS,
so I had to
yeah.
turn you way down. So you're quiet for me, but it's a me problem. And hopefully it's not a stream problem.
Well, let me see if I can real quick before we get started here. Let me just try to make some adjustments momentarily. Of course not. Let's see. Nope. I think that's as good as I can do right now. Let me listen to myself real quick here while we're talking. We are, like I said, kind of working our way through this stuff. So, yeah, that's very quiet, man. Let me see.
Hopefully, I'm not too quiet. How do I sound? Oh no, I sound fine on your end.
Yeah, you sound. Am I just hella quiet on my end, or is that? Can you hear me?
You're louder now.
Am I louder
for
now?
sure? Yeah.
Okay. Well, we will look into volume boosting as well.
Yeah.
Apologies in advance for this one. I can hear us kind of through the thing. Okay, Yeah, still quiet. I have to figure out why. It's especially funny. Am I a lot quieter than I normally am? Let me see if there's.
I mean, I can't answer that because I've got you turned down on my end.
Okay, let me. Oh. Let's try this real quick. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Can I hear myself now? Okay. A little bit of that.
I like what you did on your side of things. I just have your Discord on mine and the logo up in the top corner like you, but that's it.
Oh, I forgot to disable blurps. I'm sorry, Dex. I will refund you for that. We will continue to work on getting sound better. In the meantime, let me see. Whoops.
I realized that I was talking and it wasn't recording on my end, so people on my stream didn't hear me talking. I just heard you talking.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Funny.
So I was just
'Cause I
talking to
myself
myself
needed
that whole
OBS.
time on Jason's stream on
Yeah.
Dirty Invincible stream.
Yep. Cool. It's a good thing we're using your stream for the actual
Right.
recording.
Well, and all of this is going into the official first episode, so this fun
Yes.
technical difficulties and whatnot, it's gonna be joyous.
You'll be very joyous. Yep.
All right, guys. Let me see what I can do while we're here. Might as well work to take care of this while we're in the middle of it here instead of waiting, but okay.
MD. Okay. Spoiler alert. You're not wrong.
Not wrong at all.
Ish. Yeah.
Let me give me just a sec. I think
Big
I have
red book. Yep, the big red book. Everyone knows those books by heart.
It you know what's very funny is, and we'll get to this obviously, but there's literally a there is literally a let me try this 3, and then I have to kind of listen to my thing, so it's gonna be weird, but I apologize. Try one more time. Is that louder? Okay, test.
I do thank anyone who does.
There we go.
Either of our streams. I'm not going to call them out while we're doing the podcasts in general. Just a fair warning. I do appreciate you a lot, but for the sake of the podcast, I won't be calling it any of that, any of the alerts or anything. But I do appreciate it. So thank you very much for anyone who follows.
All right, I'm way over boosting us now, I think.
Are you?
Yeah, but I think it sounds better. Does it sound better, MD?
He says much better.
All right, cool. All right, so I think we're doing better. Let's get it started in here. Assuming that you can hear me, Jason.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So basically, we're here to talk about Hackers. Today, the 1995 cult classic. I watch this movie probably once a year. It's one of those movies,
we want to explain why we chose Hackers, or we want to go for the summary first?
That is a good question. Let me explain why we chose Hackers here, and then we can dive into the summary. Okay. So this movie, I mean, you like seriously, you hear this the name of this movie, and you tend to, especially if you work in the industry, roll your eyes a bit at it. It's just so cheesy and so all over the place, but it also encapsulates like everything about the hacking identity. It so neatly packages up and Hollywoodizes the hacker ethos and that thing that we see in our heads while we're sitting there coding away in ops.
Yeah, the Galaxy 5 brain scenes. Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like, it's got so many tropes in it that just kind of lean into the kind of stuff that we, triggers the happy centers of our brain when those of us who are in operations, administration, security and whatnot, see those things. It just kind of, it tickles those parts of us that think of ourselves that way. And I think after watching it, after sitting down, because I watch this pretty regularly, right? Like, I mean, this is a movie I will rewatch pretty regularly because it's just such as a childhood memory of mine. But after sitting down to watch this, like we picked this, I think, because we were thinking off the top of our heads, we think, oh, this is a ridiculous movie. There has to be plenty to talk about with it, right? But
yeah, tons of them, tons of plot holes to pick apart. We thought for sure prime specimen for the first episode, and it's like those memories we have of it because you said you watch it like once a year. About I don't even watch it that much, but I've watched it enough and have watched it in the background. It's like one of those background movies for me. So it's not like I sit there picking apart every episode every time I rewatch it or have it on the background. So
exactly.
I was surprised.
So when we sat down to actually like focus on this and go like, okay, let's actually start picking this movie apart. Like, it's so weird. I spent the first 30 minutes. I was a little worried. I was like, wow, they actually do a pretty good job with the technology that they represent. Obviously, the visuals are over the top and ridiculous, and they're trying to amp up the action of what hackers actually do. But the way they talk about hacking, the way the things around hacking that they talk about are like actually surprisingly accurate. There are some major issues, and some of them are very glaring, but for the most part, I think the hacking in this movie is not I thought that was going to be the easiest thing to pick on, but it is not that far off from what reality was. For sure.
Was, and right? I'd say they got it about 90 to 95% right on the actual like tech part of it,
I mean, at least as far as you would expect from a Hollywood movie, right? Like, I mean, it's still a movie, so there's still, there's some gray area and some wiggle room, but for the most part, for a Hollywood movie, like I would put this, and we'll have to do this one later, but I would say this is better than Swordfish, 100% better than Swordfish, as far as representing what a hacker does and talking about the terminology behind hacking and different things about hacking.
There weren't as many gotcha moments as I thought, like as far as plot holes either.
Right.
So, but they're there.
And then going from that though into like the funny thing is like the legal system and the way policing works is just this whole cloth invention in this movie. It is
pretty much
so incredibly different from the real world. And I'm not saying that police are more put together or anything like that in the real world, but just it is very much like a night and day difference looking at the hacking to looking at the legal aspects of this movie. And I think that was the surprising part for me, for sure. So we picked this because we figured we'd be able to pick on it because we're both in tech. We both do operations work and coding and whatnot. And so we figured this would be an easy target, but turns out that wasn't the easy target part of this necessarily. So,
yeah.
So Jason, goddamn dude, I keep Dirty.
Yep.
Why don't you give us a breakdown? Give us a summary of the plot here, and then we'll dive into the problems with this movie.
Okay. Yeah. Keep in mind, this is a very general summary. If you want an in-depth synopsis, go watch it.
Highly recommend watching this.
I'd say go watch, go read the synopsis on IMDb, but it's so scene for scene exact, like you might as well just watch it.
Might as well just watch
it.
This is a worthwhile movie to watch again.
Yeah. So the central character is Dade Murphy. He's a child hacker prodigy, and he's 11 years old, 1988. He's serving a 7-year sentence for crashing enough systems to impact the New York Stock Exchange, supposedly. And so part of his sentence is he can't touch a computer or be connected to any networked device for until he's like 18 or something. So it's like 11 years. And so we cut over to 11 years later. He's, coming of age, still in high school. And his first forays back into the world of hacking, he meets a new nemesis, and they battle out over control over a TV station scheduled for programming. And then he's up all night apparently doing this, and then the next morning, he gets the right actor into him by his mom about how he needs to stay focused and not be hacking. So he's got to go do that, go to school, and kind of balance his newfound hacker freedom with his duties as a teenager in this new school. He's a transfer student too, getting to know new students, so he's kind of fish out of water thing. And we see some gags that are played on him as that stereotypical, hey, we got to get the new guy a rough time thing. And then we start getting into him developing more connections with these new friends, and turns out they're part of this hacker gang, and they all go to this crazy hacker den, and they all sit around this table talking about all their different achievements, the book that we're talking about, the Big Red Book, and all these other books that they're just naming off, and one of them, his name is Joey, talks about going after this big target because he wants to make a name for himself. He even mentions early on, like, I need a new handle, as his.
Because you're only a hacker when you have a handle.
Exactly. You're only elite hacker when you got a good handle. So.
But how do you get a handle, Jason?
I don't know. You go to like a weird random name generator, and it comes up with something like DirtyInvincible.
Or Macron.
Or Macron. Well, that one, it's like, what's that character that means
character
an
map? That's the overscore character.
But yeah, so they talk about this hack job this guy wants to do, and meanwhile they're splicing in kind of like a montage about Joey actually hacking this holy grail of a target, this supercomputer called the Gibson that Ellingson Mineral Company has. And while snooping around, he finds this garbage file with strange contents, and he just begins copying it. And that kind of kickstarts the rest of the movie's plot, revolving around the scheme between the security director for that company, known as Plague, and his board member he's having an affair with. They're embezzling funds from Ellingson, and they're trying to pin it on the hacker crew as they discover, someone broke in. Perfect target. Let's make them the fall guy for this. Penn Jillette makes a cameo as an ops guy. Great. A lot of Tron homages going on in this Gibson, and a lot of like super information highway imagery as we cut from the hackers, and you see us traveling down the phone lines to the their target computers that they're trying to hack and whatnot. But yeah, so they're set up as kind of the fall guys for this plot, and because of this, Dade gets caught up in them. I'm going to keep calling him Dave, but it's Dade with a D.
Oh no, he's Dave now. He's cool.
Dave.
Yeah. He's Dave. You can see him in the center of the screen there right now if you're looking at the video of this. That's Dave.
Yep. So, he kind of, he takes on this new persona. He was known as this elite hacker known as Zero Cool back when he did the big crash that got him his sentencing. But now he's got to kind of hide that, and so he goes by Crash Override now, and so the rest of the crew he meets up. There's Phantom Freak, Lord Nikon. I don't know. Joey doesn't have a handle yet because he's trying to find a
handle yet.
Acid Burn is Angelina Jolie. Matthew Lillard. What was his character? I can't remember.
His serial killer.
Miguel's. It was his name, but serial killer. That's right.
Yeah.
I only remembered his actual name. It was Miguel, and I was like, what? But his name is Matthew Lillard. That's Shaggy.
His name is Shaggy. He's playing Shaggy.
Yeah.
He's playing Shaggy in the real world in New York in 1995, I think, is what he's playing.
Yeah. Yeah. So eventually Dade's past comes back to bite him because Ellington enlists the help of the Secret Service, of all people, which is led by Robert Zane. If you've watched Suits, the guy that plays Robert Zane plays the Secret Service agent in charge of handling this is Richard Gill, right?
Yeah, Richard Gill.
I know him as
Dick Gill.
As Robert Zane. Dick Gill.
Agent Dick Gill.
Yeah.
He's also Bunk Moreland from The Wire. Is another great movie or great show he was in.
Yeah. So Plague and Dick Gill try to recruit Dade to find the hacker friends and kind of turn on them and work with them, and but they were not having it at all. They want to fight back. Dade and the crew eventually they figure out the contents of the garbage file. That's a virus and that it's embezzling money, and they also kind of uncover the plot that's against them, and so they fight back. And
as only hackers
eventually,
can.
Yeah, and then eventually, when everything comes to a head, they enlist the help of other hackers around the world. They go to these TV personalities known as Blade and Razor and Blade,
Razor and
that
Blade.
run a
Yep.
show called Hack the Planet. And so this is where we get the catch line, hackers of the world unite, and hack the planet, and so yeah, together, they all fight off Plague. They torch the Gibson, and they secure the evidence they need to expose Plague, and kind of exonerate their crew. So after that, the crew does get caught in this massive hacking battle with the Ellingson mineral guys and them, all in public payphone booths and everything. It's kind of hilarious. But they eventually get caught by surprising turnaround time from law enforcement, and
an extreme level of competence that they have not shown, and it still looks like a clown car going on while it's happening.
Yes,
right.
Yeah, exactly. But so yeah, they get caught. But serial killer was
I see that you wrote his name down here as Shaggy.
Shaggy, yeah, I keep putting Shaggy in the notes. So yeah, they give the evidence to Shaggy. They basically have the disc. They hide it in a garbage can. Serial killer finds the disc. Pirates a TV station to broadcast across the world the evidence against this and kind of exonerate his friends and get them released. And then they're released eventually, and Crash and Burn are then making out on the rooftop of a swimming pool not long after that, as their friends hack the city lights in the background, and you see Crash and Burn in there, and then they just cut to the credits. But
I'd like to point out too, we're going to get to this one at some point, but they don't just get released eventually. Like, it feels like in the moment they are
right
released
away.
Immediately. Like, this random dude hijacks a TV station, says some stuff, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's true." Okay, so that's the plot synopsis. Let's start digging in. We picked out what we think are like some like key moments that are wonky, not necessarily exactly plot holes, but also, just weird scenes that don't make a lot of sense. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to just go through the list?
Yeah, we can go through the list.
Okay. I think you got it all separated out pretty good. So
yeah, I was we've got our notes, and we took down timestamps of different scenes that we wanted to do, and in the future we'll try to intersperse some of the clips from those that we want to highlight and kind of touch on them. But today we're just going to discuss them. So kind of go in order, more or less. But yeah, in the very first opening scene, or the first, not the opening scene, but the scene after that, because the opening scene is him getting sentenced as a kid, and then
as an 11-year-old being sentenced to, which okay, so that's actually something we didn't write down, but I kind of wanted to bring that up because I felt that was interesting. Was so they're saying he caused millions of dollars of damage and all this stuff. His family is charged to pay back $45,000, or to pay a fine of $45,000, and he gets what is essentially a probation where he can't touch a computer or a touch-tone telephone for 7 years. And like, they're acting like this is like something that's kind of crazy, and I feel like for the time, because this would have been like 88. This would have been 88. Like, computers were not as heavily involved in daily life back then, and I don't know what the view was of things coming up, but like I feel like that's a very like 90s view, 90s or early 2000s view of like what a real punishment would be for this. Considering the fact that computers are much more prevalent in day-to-day life, as of the 90s and on, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that caught me off guard with that scene. Again, touching on some of the stuff where I think like the legal system stuff is a little wonky in this movie.
It is, yeah.
So after that,
for sure. Yeah. Oh, so after that, he moves to New York with his mom, and he gets set up. And his first little adventures back into the hacking world are to hack a TV station. There's some conservative show that's playing on in the background, and he is basically trying to hack it so he can play the Outer Limits. Yeah. And what's great about this scene is that he demonstrates social engineering, which is totally a valid way of going about a hack if you're a hacker. And he asks the security guard, like, first off, he sizes him up to see whether or not he can fool the guy. He's like, "Do you know computers?" And the guy's like, "No, I don't know computers." And he's like, "Perfect. This is our guy. This is my guy. I could totally use this guy." And so he starts spouting off goofy jargon like the BLT drive went AWOL. Like, no one's gonna understand that.
He uses random shenanigan words to convince this guy that he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly, and to kind of establish credibility that I'm a guy that works here and I've got an emergency I need to do. So he's establishing credibility that that he is authorized to access this stuff to this guy, and then he is also instilling a sense of urgency to keep him on the back foot so he doesn't have time to really question what this guy's asking. And then he asks the guy for the phone number of the modem connected to the computer, assuming that's what he's doing. Because he asks the security guard for the number on the phone, and he goes, "Oh yeah, it's this number, and it's a phone number." So I assume he's trying to connect to the modem there, which isn't the first time this happens, but he's trying to connect to a modem using a phone line that the guy is using to talk on the phone. And we see this happen a lot when they're like trying to use the phone lines, especially the public payphones. Don't ask me how they're able to connect
also use
on
the
modem
payphones while using the modem.
Yeah, and talk on them too. But that definitely comes up more than once. That whole because if you were a 90s kid and you remember the old days when you got online, you used the modem, and that took a phone line, and so you couldn't talk on the phone and use the internet at the same time. And so
what's funny is they went to the trouble of showing us how Dade hooked his computer up to the phone line, though he isn't using his coupler modem in that scene. I guess that's a plot hole, actually. He's not using the coupler modem in that scene, and he's talking on the phone that cable, that wire from his outside his apartment runs in through his window is hooked up to.
Yeah.
So that is kind of a plot hole. I didn't even think about that. That's we actually found one. We found one.
Hey. Good job, us.
Yeah, so I agree. So many times in this movie, though, there's definitely a lot of hand waving around how some of the technology actually works, and I think that's the most egregious that it gets for the for how bad they handle technology. It's like them just not doing it right on screen, which I think is okay given the fact that most of the dialogue is correct, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that kind of, leads to one of my my favorite quotes. I don't know why it's my favorite, but it's just a yak, yak, yak. Get a job. I don't know why that's one of the
it's one of the talk shows, right? Like the talk shows is playing while they're doing the little battle back and forth.
Yeah. Well, it's right before he takes control and puts on the Outer Limits, and then Acid Burn's like, "What the hell? No, how dare someone control my TV station?" And fights back, and they have this little exchange over chat that takes up the whole screen with crazy big font like you did in the 90s, like everyone did.
Everyone had their own custom UI and splash screen that showed up whenever you chat with people.
Giant UI buttons. Yeah. Yeah, and then that leads to the TV station control hack off, which hand wavy stuff. Like I don't even know what systems they're using. I'm sure they could do it, but
I would still argue though that scene is probably the most accurate scene of a competitive hacking in this movie, probably because the technology is being reused. That's like a real tape carousel that they're using, and you really can have multiple arms on them and all that. So it feels to me like that might be the most accurate, this is what a hack battle would look like scene.
Especially compared to the ones at the end of the movie.
Everything involving the Gibson. Yeah. everything.
Yeah. The real time mitigation, like, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that. I don't know. Do you want to
So
go on the next one?
next one for me.
Sure.
Yeah. So we go on for a bit. I feel like that first like 30 minutes is some pretty solid stuff. Weirdly solid for what I remember of the movie, right? And so like near the end of that, though, we start to see things like, oh, hey, they've got Penn Jillette as the security administrator. And first off, I don't buy Penn Jillette as a security administrator. I don't know why. And what's funny is he's got some of the most textbook definitions that he spits out for hacker jargon that are actually relatively accurate. But I don't know why just seeing him there just immediately, I think it's because I know he's a magician, but my brain just immediately goes, no, this is the land of fantasy right here. He complains, when Joey is hacking the Gibson for the first time, he finds Joey by surprisingly an accurate method of finding, someone breaking into your system. He basically says one user in the sector is using up, the resources of 10 users, and legitimately for a lot of hacking that because of the exploits you have to use and whatnot to get access to things, that's valid. That's particularly valid. However, it feels weird to me in that there's kind of a disconnect between what we see, because Joey is in the system, and all he's doing is copying a data file, and sending it over the internet to his home. And it takes a while because he lays down and has a smoke and everything. And then we know their modems are pretty slow because they're excited over a 28.8 modem early on in the movie. So Penn says, oh, he's using the resources of 10 users. In my mind, I'm like, how is copying a single file over probably a 14.4 modem using the same resources as 10 users on this giant, supercomputing system? So that made me feel a little, that put me off a little bit. That was one of the early scenes that I'm just like, that's close, but not there 100%.
I rationalize that and like, hey, maybe he niced the process or something. But even then, even if you nice a file copy process, that's just not, yeah.
Right? There's a lot to, I think we had talked about this before, and you mentioned, well, it is the garbage file and it does weird, wonky things. So, I mean, yeah, later on in the movie, we see that it's an AI that generates its own videos and stuff like that. It's weird. So
has
maybe,
its own personality.
It has its own personality.
Feels pain, apparently,
Yes, right?
It's like something that's sophisticated. We don't even have that yet these days. We're getting close, but not quite yet. And this apparently is in a single file on this Gibson. And but yeah, I mean, if that's the case, okay, that's plausible as to why it would take so much resources just to copy the file. But if you've seen if you've done any file copy, especially in Windows, you drag one to another, you see, okay, yeah, it's going to take some time. And it's not that it can't, shove all that all at once and utilize all the resources. A lot of times, because a file copy operation is such a low priority thing, a lot of times systems don't give a lot of resources to those in the first place. So they're just going to, do what they do and take however long they're going to take to copy.
And usually when you say system resources, like a lot of the times as an administrator, what I think of when I think system resources, though obviously disk usage is a system resource, but a lot of the times I'm thinking like RAM and processing power, and how much RAM and processing power does it take to copy a file? It is not much. So it's weird that triggers an alert and that he's using 10 users worth of resources in the
They've had to have had SSDs back then, and using just a massive array of SSDs to get even close to the the read and write speed that would be needed to throttle the system.
Exactly. A supercomputer like the Gibson, obviously, is very delicate and sensitive to, sensitive to those kinds of reads and writes and whatnot.
Yep.
So I think the last point I want to bring up here real quick before we move on is shortly after this, we hear Eugene, who is the Plague, played by what's his name? The words and things.
Something Fisher, right?
Fisher Stevens. The great Fisher Stevens. So the Plague. So Eugene, he has this plan, and him and the executive are talking to each other, and he's explaining his plan about like where he's got a worm that's eating that's taking small parts of transactions. It's essentially the plot to Office Space is his plan.
Yep. Basically, yeah.
So, which now I realize that Office Space lifted way more from hackers than I thought it did originally. Okay. But I just, the ridiculousness of his plan, him being this like super genius hacker who also at some point, he starts telling the Secret Service what to do. Like, this guy has some power, and that power doesn't fall apart until someone else points out that, this guy's full of shit. His plan is so dumb. It's so dumb. It's like, we're going to take, little bits of this transaction, and then it's going to send it to an account, and then we're going to run away and live together on an island with this money. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good plan. And so in order to protect that plan, because he feels that the hackers are have found proof of that plan, he creates another plan where he has a virus infect the system and make videos that threaten the company for money. And it's just it goes from one cartoonishly evil villain plan to another cartoonishly evil villain plan. And I just feel like that's like I feel like that's where the movie starts going off the rails, and it kind of I kind of didn't notice it before.
Yeah. For sure. The whole thing behind, like, just even the whole Gibson setup with the whole like Tron looks to it, like they were really trying to throw in a lot of Tron imagery in here, and a lot of that whole back, you heard a lot of the information superhighway, and so a lot of times when they tried to visualize that in the 90s and early 2000s, like a common trope would be visualizing you as a speck of data traveling from one end of the connection to the other through the phone lines and pretending like you're in Tron land, and then you pop out the phone on the other end and you see the screen of the guy who's like, system's getting hacked. And
which is funny to me now, because now that I'm thinking about it too, because that's like literally how hacking works in Shadowrun.
Yeah.
You project yourself into cyberspace.
Yeah, your persona.
You
exactly.
Walk
the whole.
around
Yeah, exactly.
Do things
the
like
metaverse.
Physical space. Yeah, or the metaverse. Yeah, like Snow Crash.
It's the metaverse. Like it's sad. Like things like the metaverse take their cues from so many things that, like hackers or like in Shadowrun, but then they just bad. But yeah, that's one of the things. Like, there's another scene like when you have Plague with a VR headset on, and it's like it's very similar to like how an Oculus would look. Right.
I looked this up.
This is the 90s. And this is like
up.
back in the day.
That was a real VR setup too that he was using. The company was called Virtuality. And I
bet it was absolutely terrible.
Oh yeah, no, I 100%. The graphics on it were probably extraordinarily bad. That's the one thing I looked it up. I didn't look at what the what the graphics looked like, but the whole he's in that like ring, that whole setup, and he's got the head and he's got the one joystick. That's an actual VR system from 1995. That you could get yourself, but it's like, I mean, I'm sure it was like $50,000 just to get the hardware. Not to mention the software was probably all separate.
Yeah. And if anyone back then remembers those early attempts at VR, they were absolutely terrible. And the most infamous was the Virtual Boy. It was just garbage.
I love the Virtual Boy so much, but failure. I couldn't help but throw up half the time I used it though. So
it was so terrible, but like they all established this promise of what VR could be. Yeah. And when you see that scene with him in that headset, It's one of those things that established kind of the influence of where Oculus went, and it's unfortunately like this movie doesn't go much deeper than that into any of the VR stuff at all, aside from the whole information superhighway Tron scenes. But there's no like persona, there's no metaverse kind of thing. That's not done in this movie. Something like Lawnmower Man is something that we say, or even like the Matrix itself.
I feel like they substituted all of that in. All of that was substituted for having the handle and understanding at least that hackers are identified by whatever the username is that they choose, right? So again, one of those beacons of reality in the middle of this kind of craziness of this movie.
Yeah. But yeah, back then VR big flop, and it wasn't until the last decade or so where we've had VR that met that promise essentially, and
we didn't have.
It was kind of interesting to see
thing to stand in to use it.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see it in hackers, and because a lot of the headsets were a lot bulkier that you saw them use back then. Even like if you saw the Aerosmith video for Amazing,
yeah,
that's all a VR thing, and he's got a VR setup, and that thing is this giant helmet thing, and that's kind of what you expected back then for VR stuff. And even then, that didn't work, and it never worked how it was portrayed. But that was kind of the dream of VR. It was kind of interesting to see that hackers kind of feeding into that a bit.
The hope, the hope.
The hope that was eventually delivered on by Oculus in some form, more or less. But
it's that thing.
Still not perfect.
It's that thing where like Star Trek technologies, where it's like, oh well, we don't have iPads yet, but here's iPads, and this is how they should work. And then we eventually we get iPads that kind of actually work that way.
Our iPads, all of our tablets are far superior to anything in Star Trek. The Star Trek tablets are just dumb terminals that connect to the ship's computer, right? And the real meat and potatoes of the computing is in the ship itself, which can be done from any terminal, not just those tablets. And so that's one thing where, like, in our society, our tablets far exceed the computational power of what they were doing with Star Trek tablets, simply because of the fact that we have a whole computing device that's mobile, where they were just using something that was more than likely a terminal.
Yeah,
and it was also a very limited UI. Like today, the phones and tablets are pretty featureful and complex devices.
Well, and tons of ways to interact with them too. Like surprisingly large number of ways to interact with a phone that doesn't have any fucking buttons.
Yeah, maybe you're watching this podcast on one right now.
That's possible, totally possible. And for that, we have Star Trek and hackers to thank. That's what.
Yep.
So. I want to point out here too. So shortly after we see the VR scene here, like this is where we start getting into the weeds on some of the weirdness of how the U.S. legal system works. In that, not only does the Secret Service just randomly show up to Dade's apartment, not randomly. I mean, they've identified him as a suspect because he's tied to these other people. But not only do they show up to his apartment to talk to him, they literally let Eugene the Plague interrogate him, and he smashes a radio, and they're all just like, yep, this is how it works. This is
totally normal.
This is normal police work. We get private people all the time to come by and interrogate our suspects, and if they damage property, there's nothing wrong there.
Totally acceptable behavior.
What leads
no rights violations at all.
Right, exactly. And then from that, we get we start into the scenes where they're doing they start having the hacking battle. Angelina Jolie and what's the actor's name for Dade? I always forget the guy's name.
Oh, I can never remember, but he's from like Train Spotting and a few other stuff as well.
So Angelina Jolie and him get into this little hacker battle where they're competing to mess with Agent Gill of the Secret Service. And one of the scenes where they're messing with him, they overdraft one of his credit cards and set it to be marketed as "please destroy card," essentially. So the waiter literally swipes his card at the restaurant. He gets the message. It says "please destroy card." He, without doing anything else, this is all that happens. They show the scene uncut. He swipes the card. It says, "please destroy." He walks over to the table. He holds the card out in front of him, reaches into his back pocket, pulls out these giant sharp-ass scissors, cuts the card easily, and just leaves it on the table. And I'm like, this waiter just carries around these massive sharp scissors in the back of his pocket, prepared to cut credit cards. This restaurant is insane. I feel like that's kind of a above and beyond, right? Like, that was one of the things that kind of takes me out of the movie a little bit, because I'm just like, well, really?
That's a big trope, not just, something here, but you see that in a lot of stuff after this as well, or even before this too. It might have been just feeding the existing trope. It probably wasn't establishing the trope where, people who maximize their cards, like, they've got someone that just comes by and just destroys their card on site, And
I feel like
in front of them to, like, the things, like, they do it in front of them to, like, make them feel bad and everything, like,
right?
Look how terrible you are. You can't afford your food. Ha ha ha.
And I feel like this is one of those situations where if they put a cut in, like the waiter swiped the card and they cut to him being at the table cutting the card up, I don't think my brain would have had as much of a problem. My brain has a problem with the fact that this waiter just carries around this giant pair of scissors in his back pocket all the time. The impracticality of that bothers me for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's
just ready to go at any moment to cut up a credit card.
Yeah, exactly. It triggers that neurodivergency in my brain. Just go like, why would he? Would he though? Like, he put one cut in the middle of that where it doesn't show him walking back to the table straight from the credit card machine. And then my brain can go, okay, he picked up the scissors somewhere, we're good. But because he pulls the scissors out of his back pocket, I'm just like, he was waiting. He was waiting for someone to use a card that he could destroy. That waiter wanted it real bad.
One thing I did want to revisit, winding back the timeline a little bit on the stuff, but also touching on some of the stuff that goes bonkers with the law enforcement portrayal in here. The whole thing where they sneak up on Joey in the shower, the SWAT team.
Like, I feel like that's a problem throughout this entire movie, is that these SWAT teams are both, they're loud and in your face, but also insanely stealthy.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, like, swatting is a real thing. Like, anyone who's on Twitch watching this now, you probably heard about plenty of instances where people swat each other over garbage video game stuff. And that's the only instance where you're going to see a prompt law enforcement response over anything computing related. Most of the time, you've got to deal with stuff like subpoenas, and those take forever. Even if an ISP is willing to, like, hand over customer data and be like, yeah, here's the address and the name of the customer using the IP address at that time, that still has to go through a process that it's not instant. Yet every time they do it in here, it's like they even mention, like, later in the movie, oh, we've got a 5-minute window before law enforcement response, and it's like no.
How fast do you think law enforcement is going to respond to a hacking? And I'm with you 100% on this, because, like, later in the movie, Eugene tells Agent Gill, he tells him, you got to put a warrant out for these guys. And the agent just calls up another cop and goes, all right, we're putting out a warrant for these people. This is how warrants work. I just tell you, and the warrant is a thing, and it doesn't involve courts or anything like that. And that just how hilarious it is that they got so much of the technical jargon right. And there are a few scenes where the technical aspects of it are in the wrong. But, like, for all the law enforcement stuff, it is just like this fantasy land where we have super cops that have there's no judiciary or anything like that involved in any of this. And they're going after hackers like they're, like, incredibly dangerous people, which, I mean, legitimately, you look back at like Kevin Mitnick. Okay. He was in the FBI's most wanted list, and there was a big manhunt for him and all this stuff. Even that did not involve just, like, randomly finding him hacking and then going and sneaking up into his bathroom and catching him while he's showering, kind of thing,
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
All right, go ahead. There's gonna be a lot of this while we get used to how we're gonna do this. A lot of back and forth of the. Oh, I'm sorry. You first. Oh, you were gonna say something.
Yep.
Throw it.
Yep. No. I'll go. the next one I want to touch on is when the Plague is trying to get Dade to help him, and after like their initial thing where he busts up his radio, he tries the catching a fly with honey approach by sending him a laptop, like a brand new laptop. It's like, here, enjoy this laptop, and he's like pre-recorded a video on it. It's like, maybe you'll think again about joining us and be on the right side of things, get all these shiny new toys, and I'm like, why? What?
The best part about that scene is like the video. Let me explain to you why I want you to work with me. Here is a video of me giving this speech. Please do not show this to police. I feel like that's like
back. It's like back in our day, we had to record our videos and send the whole laptop via mail.
That's
it also includes subliminal messages.
That's how I used to submit videos to, in class. Like, we used to just
Sneakernet,
just put it on a laptop and give the laptop to the teacher, and that's how it goes, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because like later on, there's a whole thing where the Plague calls up Dade, and he's like, "I just sent you a file." And he's like, "Wait, you can send files to laptop now? Why couldn't you just send the video to the? Why did you just?
If you could just send things,
you didn't have to send a whole other laptop for that. He didn't have to send a whole other system for that file. He actually was able to send it.
No, maybe that's what. Maybe he did send a whole other system, and they set it up so that we understand now that in order how to share files, they have to just send laptops.
Yep.
And so when he said he shared a file, that means he went to UPS, had them pack the laptop with the new file on it, and send that laptop to him.
I totally misread that scene. My apologies.
Right? I think that's what. That's how movies work. It's the Chekhov's gun, right? That's the. They showed us him doing it one way, so obviously that's the way it's going to work, right?
Yeah.
Just from there on out.
Yeah.
I think so. We come back to along with the laptop thing. There's a scene where the Angelina Jolie comes to Dade and tries to get him to help because they put Joey away for hacking the Gibson. And Angelina Jolie asks Dade for help to look at what's on this disc. And Dade says something like, everyone that touches that disc goes to jail. And I'm like, he's like freaking out about this whole thing being illegal. And obviously he's had previous legal troubles, so he knows he's probably a step away from being put away anyway. He had no problem doing any of the illegal things they did prior to this. And I mean, they did some crazy shit too. Like they got Agent Gill. They put a death certificate out for him so that he was deceased.
Yes.
Which I like. This is like, we're talking about.
Sorry, sir, HR record says you're deceased. I'm
stuff
dead.
That's like infinitely worse in my mind than decrypting a file on a disk. And so I'm just like, he had no qualms with any of that up until the point where he has to decrypt a file on a disk, and then he's like, this might be too illegal for me, guys. I can't do illegal things. So that obviously he, in the same scene, essentially changes his mind to some degree, but a little bit, I guess. He says he will hold on to the disc, a copy of the disc, just in case, which he then gives immediately to the Plague. But whatever.
But it was just a copy, because then the next scene he's like hanging out with everyone, and he's like, "Hey, look at us reading all this scrolling hex output, like it's the Matrix."
Yeah, he gives the Plague a copy, then goes and hangs out with them while they decrypt the other copy of the disc.
Yeah. Which that was its whole other thing with the hex dump output. Like, yes, that's what hex dumps look like for sure, and that's actually accurate. But they don't scroll like that. You kind of manually scroll through them, and you don't. Well, unless you set it up to scroll. But either way, that's an impractical way to look through a hex dump with having scroll all of that information. You actually have to sit there and look at it and take time to look at it.
Well, especially the decoded section of the hex, because there's some scenes where I think included in that time frame, serial killer is like looking at printouts of the hex, and it's just the hex, and he's like reading through it, like he can understand the hex without having to,
it's the redhead, it's the blonde, brunette.
Yeah, it's very, very Matrixy moment.
Very Matrixy. Yeah. And I can't help but think that maybe helped inspire that for the Matrix, But
I mean, you think
about
it, that's the way they
far after this,
and they that's how they like the way we saw the Matrix world through the eyes of the administrators in the Matrix was, the scrolling text. So
yeah,
that's totally possible, because to my mind, I can't recall earlier like hacker style movies that would have shown something like that. Like, there's probably something out there, but I feel like this might be one of the first few, movies that we saw where it was like, oh, that's how hackers work. They look at a constantly scrolling screen of text and they understand everything immediately.
They also hack side by side on the same keyboard.
Yeah, that's the old NCIS move.
Yeah, which they do that. They do.
They do.
That does happen in Hackers. There is a scene where that happens, and it's when they're going over Angelina Jolie's like system and drooling over the specs and stuff. Like, there's a moment where they're like doing the dual keyboard work, and I'm like, oh, come on.
And I would like to point out that like, of all of the scenes, they're technology centric. Like, the dialogue in that scene is the cringiest. And I think probably the worst, because like they fake a processor name.
Risk will change everything. Yeah, Risk is good.
they legitimately identify that Risk will advance computing, obviously, but it's a P6 processor that's 3 times faster than a Pentium, and it's like, wait, what?
It has a PCI bus too.
And and it's got a PCI bus. You don't know how fast this thing goes. This thing is so fast. Look at those PCI bus.
So fast.
I mean, legitimately, okay, we're talking like, so if we're talking about the difference between ISA and PCI, then yes, PCI is much faster, but I don't think, I don't
Well, and back then, I don't think we had, I think PCI was the bus of the time.
We did, yeah. Oh, dude, I had PCI stuff on, yeah, because the very first Pentium system I had PCI bus on it, for sure. An old original Pentium 75 megahertz, so not the earliest Pentium.
I think
but
the system that I'm streaming on right now is probably the first one that doesn't have a PCI slot.
Doesn't actually have a regular PCI slot. Yeah. It's all PCI
PCI Express now. Yeah.
So getting back to the movie, another one of the technical hiccups I think that's there is that they describe Eugene's virus as a worm because it goes around nibbling bits of these transactions, and I was like, it kills me because they got so much right, and then they just completely inaccurately use the term worm, and
it's not a virus, it's a worm. It nibbles. It's a worm. It's like.
And they act like that was
that's not what worms are.
They act like that was
worms are viruses.
What do you call it? A eureka moment where it's like, oh my god, it's not even a virus, it's a worm. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well,
yeah, but those of us said no, like a worm is a virus,
right?
It just has to do with like how the virus propagates.
Yeah,
it's a self-replicating virus. Like there is a difference, but it's like you're saying, viruses are fruit, right? Worm is an apple, essentially. That's the comparison here to make between those two things.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, just the explanation and the description of what, like, trying them jumping through hoops to try to describe what this worm is and why it's different from a virus was just. Oh, phenomenally bad. That is the second cringiest tech scene in the movie. I think the first is still the laptop scene with Angelina Jolie and Dade. I think
does he type
Johnny
like
Lee Miller. Small sharp points pointed out. Johnny Lee Miller is Dade.
Yes, Johnny Lee Miller. I knew the last name was Miller, but I can never remember his first name. I know it's Miller. But yeah, he was apparently also in Dexter. I didn't know he was in Dexter. I didn't realize he was in Dexter, and I rewatched Dexter like 4 years ago too. So I'm surprised I didn't catch that was him. But I did see that he was in The Crown.
Oh, was he?
So, yeah, he was in The Crown. So
Man.
I recognized him in The Crown of all places, but I didn't recognize him in Dexter.
you brought up Trainspotting. I always forget that he was what's his name? Pretty Boy?
Yeah. No,
not
Boy was someone else.
I forget.
But yeah,
he
was one of them.
I always forget he was one of the guys.
Sick Boy. He was Sick Boy.
Sick Boy. Thank you, Sick Boy. Pretty Boy.
Yeah, he was Sick Boy in Trainspotting.
That's one that I always forget about. But instantly, as soon as someone says Trainspotting, I can immediately picture his character from Trainspotting. So
yeah, it's him, Ewan McGregor, and then the other guy that was in an HBO series called Rome.
Oh yeah.
And then there's also the other guy.
The other guy that's in all what's his name's movies.
The redhead, yeah. You know what I'm talking
about? Maybe. The guy that's overly violent in
Ewan Bremner. Spud. Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff.
Okay, no, him. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So back to Hackers.
Yeah.
I think
we left off on the worm. Virus is a worm. Worm is virus.
Worm is virus. So when they go to get help from Razor and Blade.
Yes.
You brought this one up.
Oh yeah, the elite hacker den with the robot gun sentries.
First off,
it turns out that they're just lighters.
and beyond that, it's the whole scene starts with them in some kind of club, and then they go into the back room, and that's where they have their hacker den. So it's like, not only are they up on stage in this club with a bunch of people dancing, and they're just like standing there dancing on the stage, then they go into a back room, and that's actually their hacker den. So I imagine this entire building is owned by them, and they have gun sentries that are also just lighters.
Yeah.
But
if they're club owners and they have the money to do that, it makes sense. But it's still like over the top, not real practical in any way, and it was really just for the lulz. Like, okay.
And I feel like a lot of this, if you go back, I think this. What's funny is I don't think there's a source for this in movies up to this point, but in books. So Snow Crash and Neuromancer, we get a lot of this kind of stuff where there's like, oh, we're going to see this hacker or this tech, and they're in this building, and they have this super duper security system that requires you to go through a body scanner, and there's sentry guns and cameras all over the place and stuff. So, like, I feel like they cribbed this from actual, like, those kinds of books, because those books have definitely had that in there by that point. But I don't think that was a big movie trope by then. That hacker dens were a big thing. But yeah, that it's just more of the extreme end of just playing up how crazy hacking is. No one lives in a place like that.
Yeah, just the over the top. And this is one of those things where the movie itself, if it is guilty of anything, it's just the over the top portrayal of all the tech and hacker culture,
right?
And how it has influenced our memory of all these scenes. And we're like, okay, our memory now is super colored by how over the top it is.
Yep.
But when you look at it, it really is like kind of on the up and up for a lot of it, it was really weird.
Yeah, and I feel like that's I think the worst of the technology flubs or just incorrect use of terminology and stuff. I think the worst of that is all centered around like it's all in an effort to make this more bombastic for a movie, which is why I think I can forgive a lot of that stuff in this movie in particular, and probably part of the reason why I love this movie so much is that as long as
it is so over top, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's a guilty pleasure movie for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
As silly as it is, a lot of fond memories. Because I mean, why else would we be watching it over and over again and having it play in the background if we didn't
Right.
enjoy it, at least, you know.
Obviously. Nostalgia obviously plays a big part of that too, because there's a lot of bad movies that I love to watch that I just remember fondly from my childhood. But I also
They
think
don't hold up. Yeah.
they don't hold up as well as like I feel like this one holds up particularly well because there is some level of reality in all of this. Reality of the time too, I think is the other important part. Like, yes, they amped stuff up and made it more bombastic, but it's still very like, that's a lot of that work is like how hackers would work on, you know, little systems that they hooked up to random phone lines and go from there essentially. So
Yeah.
it's good to see that they nailed that, at least if they didn't, you know, get the hacker dens quite right. Next up,
The public hacking in the public phone booths out in the open. They did that earlier on in the movie when they were doing their competition stuff, and I think also when they were screwing with the Secret Service. But then when it comes to like the big final showdown between them and Plague and his crew at Ellingson, they're all in phone booths out in public in the open, just, you know, hacking in open. You know, nothing suspicious here at all. You know, don't pay attention to all these kids that are booting up all these laptops that are, you know, don't be wrong, that boot up sequence is cool as fuck. And with them, you know, popping everything up and
legitimately the way they did it,
bootloaders and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're watching them all go one at a time.
Yeah, that's a great shot. I love
the
it.
way they did it. Also, was very feasible. I mean, you could literally do what they did to bounce your phone connection between other phones. It's not great, but at that time, with the kind of bandwidth you'd expect from something like that, that's all doable. My thought in the whole of that scene is, okay, why do they stay at Grand Central Station? They could have sent the phones anywhere.
Yeah,
they could have just gone to someone's apartment. They already knew they were.
Yeah, they could have just stayed in that hacker den of
right.
Was it Razor and Blade? And
Razor and Blade. Yeah, but then serial killer wouldn't have been able to broadcast his video. It would have given them more time, but they already had decided that it was going to take 5 minutes for the cops to find them. So
yeah. So let's just make it easy and put ourselves, in a location they're likely to
we'll just stay in the public, and that way we don't get other people involved, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. How about them Google glasses though that Dade's wearing?
Dude,
a whole decade and a half before they even existed.
So, and that was a real thing too. I think I looked that up. It was a real thing, but it was very much. You mentioned Virtual Boy already. It was very much a Virtual Boy thing. Where it was a small mono LCD that could put out like one line of text on a little thing in front of your face.
Oh man!
And it probably gave you the same effect that Virtual Boy did of making you just want to hork, because it's still there's nothing. It's just deflected off a little window. There's no it's not a prism. There's no lens to it, so it's not like adjusting itself so it's in your vision no matter where you're looking. That was pretty good though. Also, so you brought this up too. The when they're shutting down the virus, and the video of the Vitruvian man with the head that's talking is like crying out in pain. What the hell?
Yeah, AI with feelings that can feel pain.
Feelings. AI that
when they're attacking the kernel.
AI with feelings that can fit on a single floppy disk and be transmitted over a 14.4 modem pretty easily.
That's the other thing. Apparently, that garbage file that took the resources of 10 users can fit on a floppy.
It can fit on a floppy, and it generates videos on its own. It's crazy.
It was Elite Dangerous, or Elite. Sorry, the original Elite.
The original Elite.
Where it was like this huge giant open world that fit on a floppy, but it was all like procedurally generated.
That's what. See, there you go. So it makes sense if you think about it, right? If you dig down into it.
Totally. Yeah. But yeah, going back to the AI thing, and the whole attack on the Gibson. We see shots of the Gibson, and I keep mentioning the whole like Tron homage and stuff. But one thing that you get to see is like there's early on when they first see the Gibson, and they're doing that whole like information superhighway shot, and then they go to the Tron look of everything, and then it cuts to the real world, and you see that the displays that they've got set up in their command center is exactly like it mirrors what you saw in cyberspace.
In the cyberspace.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, those are cool looking, and I'm thinking like, how would you do that? You'd have like projectors that you'd position either on the ceiling or in the base of that unit that those glass panes are sitting on, because those are clearly glass panes.
It's magic glass. It's magical glass. Yeah. I can tell you exactly how they did it though, because this is going to go in the trivia section too. But
okay, the funny thing is like just when it's getting attacked and they're attacking the kernel and you see it spazzing out and there's electricity crinkling out from the text and everything on the glass. It's like, where is that coming from? Like, these are just supposed to be glass panes that are showing things. There's not actually like...
Hacking involves a lot of lightning. You would be really surprised. You project electricity through the internet.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
So you brought up another point around that same scene where so they get arrested there at the phone booths, and serial killer is there, but he's like kind of he was off doing something else, and so he comes back to see them getting arrested. Then he like kind of just hunches over and hides in the crowd, but then also responds to Dade shouting out "Hack the planet."
Yeah, like. They're all wanted. From the cops. They're all known. The cops all know their faces and what they look like at this time, and he's in this shitty disguise.
And he obviously knows that they know, because he's trying to hide in the crowd just before this, right?
Yeah. And so Dade is yelling, "Hack the planet," and he's responding back, "Hack the planet!" Like the only person in the crowd, and while wanted in a very shitty disguise. That it's still very clearly him.
And I don't know how tall Matthew Lillard is, but the dude's like got to be 6'10". I don't know. He's huge. The dude is tall, and he's dressed up all crazy, and he's got his fist in the air yelling, "Hack the planet!" You know,
he's such a gem. Like
I love Matthew.
This movie set like. What like it was like if you had to cast Matthew Lillard or anything, like they used this to typecast him basically.
What cracks me up is because he plays this same character. This is his Shaggy. This is his SLC Punk character. This is like all the other movies he's been in. He plays this same character for the most part in the same time frame. Scream. He plays the same character in Scream.
Yeah,
he's the tall, goofy guy who is a little too involved in whatever the core premise is of the movie. Right?
He's literally Shaggy. He was born to play Shaggy. Like the Nintendo Generation speech that he gives too.
Yeah.
It's like
and he has a couple of those little speeches throughout the movie, right, where he's like trying to amp people up. Yep. And to me,
and it sounds very profound, but at the end of the day, it's like the guy's just stoned.
And I'm pretty sure it's like it feels like Matthew Lillard just read the script and then just put together a bunch of random words from the script to make some of these speeches. It works perfectly. Don't get me wrong. I'm not.
It does.
For how crazy and off the wall his speeches are, they are one of the least cringy parts about the movie, right?
Oh, they're some of my favorite parts.
Some of my favorite parts, because it's totally inspiring. It's very inspiring as someone who was a young computer engineer at the time watching this. So Matthew Lillard, just priceless. Also, so in that same scene where Dade's getting arrested, Dade and Angelina Jolie, Dade and Byrne, Crash and Burn, are in a police interrogation room, and Dade, who has been arrested before.
Oh, the bad chivalry scene, yeah.
Yeah. So this is probably another cringy part where it's like very, especially like, oh well.
I'm going to take the fall for you.
Angelina Jolie needs saving is the message we get here, and they did this. They went back to this a couple of times because this happened too when they're talking about the file. Angelina Jolie is like freaking out because he said he gave the disc to Plague, and she's like, well, there goes MIT, and so he's trying to save her from losing her shot at being something here. And it's like, my very first thought is the easiest way out of this. You guys just need to buy time. You just need to buy time. The easiest way out of this is to ask for a lawyer. I'm sure that your lawyer previously probably would have told you if you ever get arrested, just ask for a lawyer. Don't answer
Yeah.
questions, ask for a lawyer. And like, so instead of doing that, what does he do? He immediately says, "Oh, I did it. It was me. It was all me. Everything you want me to pin on anyone is me. It was all me." And just,
It's such a bad trope because I was just watching a series, and there's a character in there, and he does the same thing. He's like tries to do the chivalrous thing and like take the fall for everyone, and it's like, no, what?
well, and I feel like
No.
they're trying to show like too, like that this is like, because like they pump him up as this really smart guy throughout the whole movie, which we don't necessarily constantly see it. He comes across as kind of dumb sometimes. But they try to pump him up as this really smart guy, and then you see him sitting in there, and you know he's like so incredibly blinded by the sexist need to protect Angelina Jolie's character. No one else, by the way. He's not. It's not that he's protecting anyone else in this. Like he could have gone and tried to protect Joey this way. Didn't do it. Nope. He instead, they're in this situation together, so he has to protect her, and it just. It comes across as like there were other options here, but you instead chose to immediately make an ass of yourself while trying to overplay the chivalry card.
Yeah.
And it just, it makes me really, really. That's one of the things that pins this movie as a product of its time too, in a sense, because I don't think we would see. I think if we saw that kind of behavior in a current movie, it would be made fun of for obvious reasons. Like in the movie.
And in the last couple of decades, like scenes like that have been treated with like kind of the eye roll, like the female character be like, yeah, guy's just acting like a guy, doing the stupid chivalry thing, and they kind of like you said, poke fun at it and kind of eye roll it away, and it's getting to the point now where they're finally like they're getting away from it, and just not
not doing it now,
bothering it. Yeah, it was great.
Like people, I mean, and there's no reason, like there's perfectly good reasons to like sacrifice yourself to save someone else. I get that, but it's the way it's played up and the way it's actually talked about in movie it's just it feels cringy.
Well, like parents sacrificing themselves to save their children, that makes sense. Well,
and like if it was a thing where he's like, oh, these are my friends and I want to protect them, again, like where was this?
Where's Joey?
When Joey was put in jail, you could have easily just gone to the office and said, I did it all, and then you'd have the same effect. And I mean, the other thing is it doesn't really save Angelina Jolie from anything, him saying that. Again, asking for a lawyer would have done more than him saying what he said. It's all for show. And so that just, that hurts a little bit.
The White Knight.
And that, that gets into the whole thing too, where it's like, he's him saying that fixes everything. Well, in the same time, so Serial Killers broadcast comes on while they're in, being held. Everyone comes out of the interrogation room to watch this. And then the police act like, well, this immediately solves the problem and we can't hold you guys. And everyone's like, all the hackers are happy and hugging.
You're all exonerated.
Everyone's exonerated because some random dude came on a TV show and told us that we're wrong. Which admittedly, like, okay, so that's the other thing is I also didn't remember that he actually provided some kind of evidence while they were on the call. It was just an account, a financial account. And you and I, being computing people, know a little tiny bit about what do you call it, forensic accounting, and like verifying what he says would take time. Like there's no one would look at that instantly and go, yep, that's a bank account in the Bahamas and that's got money in it that's illegal. Obviously this is the problem and not these hacker kids that we've been chasing this entire time. And to go along with that, so this is so we're piling on the weird police decisions here. To go along with that, Eugene gets arrested on the plane. They wait until the plane's in the air to arrest.
His weird Einstein disguise.
He's wearing this disguise, and the cops are there. Like, so the agent Gill is there. They're all on the plane. They're just hiding in a closet or something like that until the plane's up in the air, and then they arrest him.
Yeah.
On a trip to Hong Kong, and I'm just like, what's the reason?
When did Robert Zane get on the plane?
Right? What was the reason for waiting though? Obviously, you knew he was on the plane. You obviously got to the plane before it took off. You didn't. There wasn't just some other like Secret Service plane flies in and drops you off on top of the regular plane. This isn't what was that?
It's
what was
one
that
of those
movie?
like over the top things, like, oh, we got to ensure we caught him, and he can't get away if he's in the air when we're in the air with him.
But yeah, it's like where's he gonna go? Like, is he gonna jump out one of the emergency exits and he's on the runway where you probably already have other cops waiting for him?
Right?
Like, I just did not.
Easily could have been done at the gate. Yeah.
Easily could have been done at the gate. So I think that just about wraps up our our funny little comments about how dumb some of the story is there, or some of the scenes or plots or plot points or whatnot. So I'd like to take a step back from looking at the plot and whatnot and talk about some trivia about the movie here. So we already talked about. You already brought up Wendell Pierce. He plays Agent Gill, and he's been in The Wire. He's been in all this stuff. Like, you look at his stuff, like, so much of his work, he's a cop, and he does it really well. So it doesn't surprise me, and he plays it differently in different roles. Because in The Wire, he's much different than the Secret Service cop he is playing here. But I think there was a couple other people that kind of caught me off guard. Seeing him too, I always forget that he was in this movie, and he's pretty young in this one because most of the stuff I've seen him in was from like the even later in the 90s or early 2000s. Because like The Wire, I think was early 2000s, like 2005 or something like that. But I don't know if you noticed, but his partner,
He was in The Money Pit. What?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
He's been in a lot of stuff. He is a prolific actor, and he's always great in everything he's in. Wendell Pierce, love that man. But I don't know if you noticed, one of the other agents was Mark Anthony, the singer.
Oh,
so Agent Ray.
Yeah, the guy that was like going in disguise in the
guy who went in as disguise into the hacker club.
Yeah.
That's Mark Anthony. I was like, holy crap! I didn't realize that Mark Anthony was an actor in general, and apparently he is. He's been in a bunch of other stuff too.
I recognized him. I just didn't put that together. That was actually together. Mark Anthony. Yeah.
Well, and he's this was like a big movie, like his first big movie. I think he had been in a couple of things before this, as far as acting goes, but that was his first like big movie. Obviously, we have Fisher Stevens as the Plague, which he's been in a few other things. This is probably his most
one
prominent
we're probably going
role.
to do another movie with him in is Short Circuit.
Oh yeah, okay. So this is like his second prominent role, because that's the other thing that I remember him from my childhood. So Fisher Stevens, though, obviously great, another great actor. I think, and what he brought to the Plague was, like, none of the story stuff was his fault. A lot of the ridiculousness of the story kind of revolved around his character, but the way he played the character was like just beautiful hacker villain. Just anytime I think of hacker villain, and I think they did a good job of making him kind of counter, because like Mark Anthony's character reads the hacker's ethos at one point in time, and I think Fisher Stevens' character, the Plague, delivers a perfect counter to that, where it's all very much like, well, I'm going to get mine, you get yours. Take care of yourself. I'll throw you under the bus as soon as I can kind of attitude about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like all the hackers in general have this kind of like collective, we'll protect each other and take care of each other kind of attitude. I think Fisher Stevens, wonderful job in that role, and he's been in a bunch of other stuff.
Many things.
So many other things. So some other interesting bits.
The Mario Brothers movie.
Who was he in the Mario Brothers movie?
He was Iggy Koopa, apparently.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
Which I remember him being in the movie. I didn't know that he was actually like Iggy Koopa.
I didn't realize that was him. I had to think about that for a minute. Holy crap. So there's a scene where the Hack the Planet scene, where they bounce around and show all these international hackers. Pretty much all of the people in that scene are some big name of some kind. But the two that really stood out to me are, first off, the London hacker who starts off the scene. That's David A. Stewart, who is the lead singer for the Eurythmics, or the lead visionary for the Eurythmics. I thought that was kind of interesting. But the other interesting one is the Italian hacker that they show. The woman is Roberta Gotti. As in, God damn it! I looked this up and I forgot exactly what her relationship was. But it's like of the Gottis, like.
Okay.
I forget what, but she's like related to them, like related to the family in some way.
Yeah.
which is particularly funny because it's the Italian hacker there. Um, Obviously, one that was not a surprise, but I question constantly is Penn Jillette as Hal. First off, they credit him really weirdly in the movie. At the very end of the movie, when they're doing the scene in the pool, they start running some credits on the bottom side of the on the bottom of the screen. They start with an associate director, I think. Then they credit Penn Jillette as Hal, and then they go to a London casting director, and then they cut over to regular rolling credits. And so I'm sure that's something that was in his contract, but it just felt really weird to me to see like they weren't talking about any of the other actors in the credits. It just, he's the only one that showed up in that main like little credit blip, and I thought that was very funny. The other thing that they credit two guys as hacker consultants. Jack Hitt and Paul Tuff. I think it's Tuff. I believe that it was Paul Tuff is his name. Both of those guys are writers, and they've done articles for The New Yorker and Wired. They're both award-winning writers, but they're listed as hacker consultants. And I was just like, I was caught a little off guard by that because I'm like, wait, aren't these guys like journalists and not hackers? I would think that you maybe call them consultants, but calling them hacker consultants felt like a little far. They have covered hacking material, so maybe they were the source of where they got some info for the movie. But just that felt a little weird to me. So I think they, however, probably introduced the person who wrote the movie to the jargon file, which is it's a file that's been kept for a long time. It's a public access file, and it defines hacker jargon, which I think is part of the reason why the movie got so much terminology correct. Is that they actually use the jargon file to write the script. And it's funny because you can kind of tell when it falls apart is when they're doing some of the scenes where it's like the laptop scene with Angelina Jolie. That's where they start making up some stuff. Both her and Miller are actually like saying like they're like they start saying weird off the wall shit. I think it's because they needed to have them, they needed a scene and they didn't have stuff that just magically fit together for that scene, so they just made up stuff. Every other scene where they're talking about technical stuff, it's pretty close, except for the worm, obviously, but pretty close. So I think we have the.
Well, there's other things like during the hack battle, like where Penn is or Hal, his characters, is coordinating with Plague, and they're all like talking about real-time mitigation stuff, and like some of that real-time mitigation stuff, like it doesn't work that way. And as someone who's like had to deal with a real-time, like thwarting an attack in real time, it doesn't work that way.
It's not. Yeah, you don't sit together in the middle of your supercomputer with all the giant glass displays with the lightning flashing. You don't do that. That's not what you do when you mitigate an attack.
They're like, run the antivirus. It's like, well, why wasn't your antivirus already running to begin with? And
no,
two,
that's
just not how it. You don't use it as a real-time countermeasure. Like, by the time it's like scan the virus and get, oh, it's a virus. It's already done the damage and it's on to the next thing. All you got confirmation for is that it's a virus. It's like,
especially if the virus is a worm, because the worm is self-replicating.
Self-replicating.
It's already gotten past the point.
Rabbits, flu shots.
All of the things. I love the whole like they picked words that like, oh well, these could conceivably be some kind of attack thing. Oh, and this could conceivably be some kind of inoculation to that attack. Like, yes. So I feel like there's certain scenes where like they had to have this rapid fire like conversation. I feel like that's when it really falls. That's when the talk really falls apart. But the like. Early on, when they're just talking about things like the books, even the Rainbow books, they're actually using like legitimate names. They're using legitimate book titles. Like those are all real books, the books that they talked about, and you can kind of trace them back to what they might actually be, because there's some of them. There's a few different books that kind of fit the description, but they accurately describe the books, and in some cases accurately give the titles along with the color of their covers and whatnot. Only 2 of those books, by the way, that they list off are actual Rainbow books, which are the Rainbow books are the DoD. It's produced by the DoD for computing system information. I think so. The other thing I wanted to bring up as part of the trivia was, so we were talking about the glass the glass city is what they called it, I guess, in production. I looked this up because this was kind of interesting to me. So both in the beginning, when they show them flying over the circuit boards and all that stuff, the kind of like, it looked kind of like the, I don't know if you remember the cartoon
Tron.
reboot.
It's a Tron-esque.
Tron. Yeah, very Tron-esque. Yeah. So all of that is a physical model that they did. But also the City of Glass is a physical model. And they literally, all they did was etch all of that text into glass, and then they edge lit it with LEDs when they needed to like highlight something. So that's all of the scenes where you see the like things lighting up and stuff. Wow. Those are all just sheets of glass that they edge lit, that they etched in.
I gave it more credit than it deserved. Like,
right?
Well, I was like, yeah, maybe your projector can.
The argument is that, from my understanding, is I don't know. This is all IMDb information here. I apologize if any of this is incorrect, but I'm pretty sure the way that's all set up is right because I read that in a couple of different places. But apparently the director thought they tried doing some CGI testing to show it, but the director thought it didn't look like real enough. It didn't look like in-world enough, you know? And so he had this idea to do all of this with physical effects and props. And then apparently that led to them actually making when they made the City of Glass, they actually built the terminal room in that. And that's why we have that physical representation in the movie. But yeah, so apparently they thought they were going to originally do CGI, which at the time would not have looked quite as good, apparently, for some of that. Wouldn't have felt, it does have some kind of like gritty realism to it that I feel, it felt really hard to pin down to being actually from 1995 for me, you know? And it turns out that's because it is fucking real. Physically very real.
Crazy.
Right? So that's the end of my list of trivia for this movie. What can we say about Hackers, man? This was it's a great movie. We give it all the shit. We talking about it, and you know, even though I was very surprised by how accurate some of it was. You know, in my mind, I give it a lot of shit for being just a cheesy '90s, you know, computer movie, but
exactly.
It surprisingly still holds up. It is an enjoyable watch today. It is definitely, it's on my list of movies that I rewatch every year or two, you know. It just kind of, it has something to it that you look at other movies in this kind of genre. Like I would put like, let's say, Johnny Mnemonic, I think, is another example of a movie kind of in this genre, though it takes place in a future, you know, it's more sci-fi than this is.
It's actual cyberpunk, yeah.
But it's actual cyberpunk. It kind of fits that cyberpunk genre. But I don't think Johnny Mnemonic stands up as well as this movie does. And Johnny Mnemonic is almost whole cloth made up. Like, I mean, there's so much, like, obviously it's based off of Gibson's work. And it gets
the Gibson.
It gets some extra, you know, boost from that. Oh, we didn't even talk about that. The fact that the supercomputer was named after William Gibson. Writer of Neuromancer and Johnny Mnemonic and Mona Lisa Overdrive and all these awesome books that you should read if you're into cyberpunk. But yeah, so I think like a movie like author, Johnny Mnemonic, where the whole thing is made up. So like you should be starting from a position where it's easier to just dismiss inaccuracies. Like I think even in Johnny Mnemonic, I don't give Johnny Mnemonic as much credit as I give Hackers because. And it turns out I was giving that credit to Hackers because they legitimately did some of the work and did actually accurately describe stuff. So, you know.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned before, like, there are some movies that are going to be a lot harder to pick apart because they're internally consistent, even if they're not plausible. Like, you know, the time travel in Back to the Future.
Or we talked about
bad, you know,
Deadpool
but
is a good example of like
Deadpool, exactly. You can't.
Deadpool is a movie where it's there's so many problems with it, and it's so ridiculous and over the top, and that the problems with it are core to the movie, right?
Yeah, and it's self-aware of it, and that's what makes it hard to pick apart, is because it's so self-aware.
Yeah,
any movie that's self-aware, it kind of doesn't really work well for picking apart the plot holes.
Which I think this one kind of toes the line because looking at it, like I remember it coming out originally, and I remember it like I haven't looked up. I should look up a trailer to see what the trailer looked like because anytime I look at old movie trailers, I'm always shocked at how we got excited for movies before because old movie
Yeah.
trailers are terrible. But I seem to remember this one taking itself much more seriously than I feel like the fandom of it now takes it, right? Like where it's like, oh, this is a serious like hacker action drama movie, with a little bit of comedy there, and
Yeah.
I think the lens we look back on it with is much more forgiving than the lens I think it tried to project on itself coming out originally.
Yeah. 100%.
All right, guys. I think we're getting to the end.
Yeah,
We did not. We wrote up a lot of stuff. Did not write up a way to end this thing. So so
I think we don't have the next movie decided quite yet. But I think are we still going to do this next Friday or?
I think this was easy enough. Now that we got the tech working, hopefully it stays working. I think this was easy enough that we could do this again on Friday. This wasn't too hard, so okay. I think we'll try to do this. We'll see how this goes. We'll try to do this weekly on Fridays, 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's -7 UTC if you're not in Pacific.
There may be a time where we don't stream on Fridays at 1 p.m. exactly, and that'll be fine. We do intend on putting all these on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel set up.
We're also going to get we're going to get podcast distribution set up for this too. So it's this episode might not go up on podcast platforms right away, but eventually we will get it there. And going forward, hopefully we'll have, once we get that set up, as it goes up on YouTube, it'll also go out on podcast platforms. So
so don't worry about missing any future episodes. There's always the VODs, and then they'll also be on YouTube eventually, and yeah,
yep,
wherever you find your popular podcast. Wow,
wherever you get your podcast from, wherever you harvest your farm fresh podcasts, look for us there.
From bit to plate,
bit to plate.
All right.
Oh, we crack ourselves up. All right, guys. So we will see you again next week. I'll put out an announcement with what movie we're gonna do next on in my Discord and any places where we do announcement-y things. So keep an eye out. If you don't already, drop myself and Dirty Invincible a follow on Twitch. We do other things. We do painting and gaming on Twitch, and I'll also put a link. I don't have the link right now, but I'll put a link to our to this podcast YouTube channel up on my Twitch page and in Discord and whatnot, so people can find that too. And I think that's it. Are we ready to clock out here, Jason?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right, man. It has been good talking to you. Thank you very much for people that joined in. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I will catch you guys later. I'm going to flip over here to my
Thank you for joining.
End of stream outro.